Good afternoon, friends. David Wright here, and I am your host of the Disruptive Innovators Champions of Digital Business podcast. And today I am lucky enough to be joined by Maria Russo. Maria, it's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited
Of
about it.
course. Yeah, of course. So, Maria, for those of our listeners who may not know, can you tell everyone a little bit about your current role?
Yeah, I'm the Chief Information Officer here at OU Health in Oklahoma City. So I'm responsible for all of the function of the IT organization. We're a healthcare organization, so we have Epic, and I'm responsible for all of that, all of our applications, technology, infrastructure, our PMO. We have a very exhaustive list of things that we're responsible for. And of course, the customer service to make sure everything runs smoothly on an ongoing basis.
I couldn't help but notice that Epic UGM, you guys were acknowledged for your stars. So congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, we're really proud of that. It's been a long time coming. We went through the implementation during the COVID era. So that really means a lot to this organization to have gone through the implementation over years. And then, it's just really empowering for the organization to be recognized at the first shoot out of the gate.
Of course. Those lifts are heavy ones. So again, kudos. Maria, I want to get into just a little bit more about you as an executive. Before we do, we just like to start the episode with one piece of actual advice you might look to leave our listeners with today.
Find yourself a mentor, somebody who can help you do something, meet your goals. They can provide advice to you. They can, help navigate you as you go through your career, and then pay it forward. After you've been mentored, take the opportunity and mentor somebody else. It's rewarding on both ends. And so I think that's some good actionable advice that can really help you as you move through your career.
Advice that I practice for sure. So Maria, let's talk a little bit about your trajectory as an executive. So how did you start out, and how did you get to be the CIO of a renowned, health system?
I started my career at Arthur Andersen, and I learned healthcare from the ground up there. It was just happened that I was in the healthcare, or actually the consulting arm of Arthur Andersen way back in the in the 80s, and then just happened to be assigned to a healthcare project, and I have been in healthcare ever since. So I spent 5.5 years with Andersen, and then had the opportunity to go to First Consulting Group and did more strategic work. Andersen was more implementations, and then after being at First Consulting Group for a couple of years, I was had the opportunity to go to Ernst & Young, and I spent 11 years at Ernst & Young implementing systems, and then got into outsourcing. And while I was there, the last half of my consulting time at Ernst & Young, I went into the outsourcing arm and became outsourced as a chief information officer for an organization that bought some facilities. So actually Tenet bought some facilities in Philadelphia, and I did that for 4 years. And that's when I decided I was going to be a CIO at some point in time in the future. And then I progressed on to going to Deloitte and spent a couple years at Deloitte, and then actually got my first opportunity to be a CIO in Louisville, Kentucky, at Jewish Hospital and St. Mary's Healthcare. And they were subsequently purchased by CHI and turned into Kentucky One Health. And that's how most people will know them now. And then after all the purchasing from, the CHI, had an opportunity to be the CIO at Tanner Health System. Spent almost, I think, 3.5 years there, and then had the opportunity to go to Kaiser Permanente in Northern California. And I spent 3 years as their executive director, working with their product is called Health Connect, and supporting Epic in the Northern California region. And then got wooed away by a School of Medicine in Washington University as their CIO for their School of Medicine, and really kind of stumbled upon my opportunity here for OU Health. And that opportunity turned out to be just amazing. I've been here almost 3 years, and it's been a great journey, learned a great deal. And it's really exciting to be part of an organization that's truly the only academic medical center in the state.
It's always great to meet executives, CIOs that have had that experience as consultants, because I feel like you get to work with so many different types of organizations and different situations and different types of people. And it seems, right, I'm not a CIO, it seems that it serves to help in, in leading and inspiring folks and handling difficult situations. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's very true, because when you're in consulting, you show up at a client site, you have to figure out how to get something done in an environment you have no idea what it's all about. So as you move through your career, having that skill, being able to do that really helped. And I also believe that, having that health information, technology background and implementing EMRs also prepared me for especially my role here at OU Health, because the first thing I was charged with when I got here was to do that, to help get our Epic project live. So that's, having that background really, really helped me understand what that entailed and what it meant for this organization.
And to your first point, particularly in that no two academic health systems are the same. I feel like that world in particular is just state by state, institution by institution. There's just all sorts of different caveats and rules and nuances. So I'm sure that there was a learning curve there. So Maria, super interesting kind of journey. What would you say is one of the most important things that you learned over the course of your life, your career, personally and or professionally, and what was life like before learning it and after learning it?
The most important thing I learned was about people and the people aspect of the work and your life. Understanding that you can't get things done by yourself all the time. Even though you might want to do that, you can't do that. It's really important to understand how to voice all the things that are really good and all the things that are good that are happening in your life, as well as in your job, and touting yourself, kind of like having a brand and owning that brand. And I think that is what I've learned as I traveled through my life. And before knowing that, it was more an expectation of how was I going to get promoted. I thought just working and doing a good job, that's how I was going to get promoted. But it's more than that. It's also people understanding your ability to interact with others and interact with difficult personalities, and then taking that interaction and it's not about, I always felt like I was going to be so conceited if I said, I did something great. I learned over time that it's not about that. It's a fact, you did something great. You deployed something, you led something, and you can still be humble and modest as you go through that and tout that and socialize why you are a good fit for a specific role. It's kind of like interviewing for every single role in your organization without leaving the organization. You're constantly interviewing for your job. And I think after learning all that, I felt much more comfortable in my role and in my shoes. And that does bleed over into your personal life, because you take those interpersonal skills and you interact. I have a son who's now 24, Matthew, and interacting with him is, it's all about the interpersonal skills that I have with him. And certainly the same with my husband, Tim. It's just how you kind of bleed that over into your personal life that kind of helps you manage your relationships both personally and professionally.
What about a time that you were challenged or that you had failed, but you really took away a profound lesson leading out of those events? Is there a time that sticks out in your mind that you might be able to share with us?
There's lots of those. Unfortunately, I find that I learned the most by failing. I would say during COVID, our project here at OU Health for our Epic implementation started a little bit before I joined. And then when I joined, COVID hit. And it was very difficult to understand how we were going to get this project done. I was new. People were looking at me like, you own it and you have to make it happen. That was a very difficult time, because there were times when I felt, wow, I think I'm failing. I cannot get this done. There's supply chain issues. There's personnel issues. There's people were here on site and now they're not on site. How do you make a project work that way? The good news is we were able to figure it out. And as you mentioned earlier, we really had a very successful go live. But there were times I felt gosh, how are we going to get this over the hump? How are we going to make this work? But, perseverance and understanding that, I had to set expectations. We were going to have some pauses and we were going to have some changes to our timeline, which if I was a little bit younger in my career, I probably would have been nervous and afraid to actually communicate that. And where I was in my career and learning about, it's not about that. It's about making sure people knew there were no surprises. That's how we got through it. And it took us a little longer than we had anticipated, but it was really worth the end result.
I love that you brought up the managing of expectations because it lends itself to customer experience, right? And me as an IT executive, thinking of my colleagues as customers. And so like the customer service organizations that I gravitate towards the most, they do a really, really good job of communication and managing expectations. So for example, with Delta, before I'm getting on the plane, they're sending an email. They're like, hey, this is what to expect, on the flight. This is the type of aircraft. This is what you'll have access to. If the flight's delayed, they're texting. It's in the app, and I might be slightly annoyed that the flight is delayed, but my expectations are managed and I know what to expect. That alleviates a lot of angst. And I agree. As an executive, I have to get comfortable in delivering, news that, if I had a magic wand, and I want it to be a different way, obviously I would, but it's my responsibility to properly manage expectations. And also I can only control what I can control. Getting all worked up over things that are, a worldwide pandemic, right? It was awful and there are so many things to be concerned about. Above and beyond a technology rollout, there's only so much you can do. And I have to put my attention towards, okay, what can we do to move through this rather than getting caught up in the fear of, what are people going to think? Just a good example.
Thank you. Yeah, I find that managing expectations is one of the key success factors for an executive. You have to be able to manage upward, and you also have to be able to manage downward with your team and do it in such a way that people understand while their expectations might not be met, they will have a solution. It just might not be the one they're looking for.
And who knows, it could end up being better than they could have imagined. Right? That's been my experience. I had this vision of what life would look like when I was younger, and in developing a new philosophy over the years of just the next right action and focusing on what I can control. Life has turned out much more beautiful than I could have imagined for myself. So Maria, I want to get more into, your current role. Before we do, we just like to ask favorite book, either that you're been reading currently or all time. Your choice.
It's not really a book, but it's a blog. So people don't know this about me a lot, but I love cars and I love, kind of working through what's the car of the future. And I had an opportunity a while back to have a professional drive me in a NASCAR on a track, and it was amazing. Then as I think through the cars, how is our energy going to support cars in the future? And so my favorite thing right now is this hydrogen fuel news podcast, or actually blog, and it talks about how things are changing and how our country, other countries, car manufacturers are looking at hydrogen as a potential energy source to power our lives. And I find that fascinating, and understanding, can you have an internal combustion engine using hydrogen? And there are car companies that are looking at that. And that's just something that I worry about for future generations. How will we power our lives? Because every new generation uses more and more energy. And I think if we could solve that for our country and for our society, we as a country, our future would be limitless. We could go anywhere, do anything once we solve that solution. So I'm hopeful that will be something that we can adopt here in America and have as an alternative to other energy sources.
So Maria, you're the CIO at OU Health. Can you describe your vision for IT and digital that's derived from the overall mission of the organization?
OU Health strives to be the destination for specialty care, and being an academic medical center and the only one in our state, IT really has to help live up to that. And so my vision for IT here to not only be a world-class service delivery organization within the organization, but also to figure out how to empower business operations, the operators, the leaders to solve their problems, their business problems using technical solutions. And that could be optimizing some of our existing systems, especially Epic. Now that we've got that live here, we need to optimize that and make those investments worth it to the organization. And it's such a great product, and I think it's going to be so good for us. But we have to own that, and IT can help facilitate all of that within the organization. The other things I think that we can do is, from an IT perspective, is make sure that we understand and bring the patient's voice and experience into everything we do. As a patient myself here, as a user of the services, I want to have the best experience, and technology is now so pervasive in healthcare, in organizations, in our lives, that it needs to work seamlessly, and that should not be a barrier to any of the missions and goals that the organization wants to achieve. So my vision is really to get us to the point where we are not that barrier. We are the enabler of the business organization of OU Health.
Are you able to share, at a high level, whatever you and the organization are comfortable with, but maybe some of the initiatives that roll up to that vision?
One of the initiatives was what we had just gone through when I first joined. Epic is a stepping stone to that. And as part of that Epic implementation, we also had a little bit of a IT transformation that we underwent. We put in a new network in order to facilitate our Epic platform to run successfully. We implemented enterprise imaging systems as part of that transformation. We migrated off of HCA, which we were a part of for a very long time, and very appreciative of the help that we got to help us do that, to become OU Health as an independent organization. And we also integrated with the university and the clinics that were part of the university that came over and became OU Health, helped us grow into OU Health. Those were the underlying initiatives that we just put into place. And I think some of the initiatives that we're looking at now is, how do we get to that next level? How do we incorporate some of the things that are coming up through the industry, like generative AI, some of the wearables, like the Apple Watch? Can we use that to help us, help patients have a better experience with us? In general, it's really getting to that next level and taking advantage of some of the technologies that are coming up and implementing them in a way that helps us help the patients have a better experience and also better access to our services.
Yeah, it's funny that you brought up Apple. I was at it in Madison, and I was having a conversation with a colleague this week about how at Health and Vive and like these tech conferences, even HIMSS, like you see Google and Amazon and you see some of these other players, but you don't see Apple. And it's very strange, because I feel like one of these days Apple is just going to like hit the New York Times, like Apple takes over healthcare. It's like, because they have like all these pieces, it's like, it'll be really interesting, but I feel like they're sneakily going to like really make a huge impact in healthcare, and they don't need to really like
shout it.
Shout it. Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really cool. What about, so you're breaking off this OU Health, coming out of an Epic rollout. What are some of the biggest challenges that you guys are facing as an organization right now?
The healthcare industry has a lot of headwinds, financially, resource constraints, both on the clinical side and the non-clinical side, even the IT side, so there are so many things that those headwinds that we're facing. And I would say that the way that we can address those challenges is actually take advantage of some of the technologies that are coming to fruition. When I was growing up, there was no such thing as a cell phone. There wasn't even such thing as a computer. And so when you think about where we are and as a society and my son will never know a world without those things. And I think if healthcare can harness those technologies and really figure out how to position them in a safe way within the environment to deliver care, I think that's really how you open up the future of healthcare and help stave off some of those headwinds that aren't going to get better. I think over time, it's all just going to be worse as people choose to leave the healthcare industry, or, people are retiring and there's not the same number of people, that can fill in the backup of them. How do we use technology to help us address that, or at least minimize that? I think that's really the challenges that we're facing can be mitigated by thinking through that very strategically.
I remember at Chime Fall Forum last year, they had brought up some McKinsey numbers about physicians that would be retiring in the next 5-10 years, and the rate of students applying to medical school to be like general practitioners and things of that nature. And it's scary. I mean, there's like a big gap there doing the things that you're saying. I mean, I think that in regard to AI, leveraging generative AI in corresponding with patients on the front end or even throughout the life cycle, that, you know, there's a little bit of trepidation there as we kind of organization by organization figure out how to ensure that the data that model is using is controlled, and how to set up rules to make sure that that generative AI isn't, you know, starting to talk about something inappropriate and, you know, things of that nature. But in the interim, right, like from like one of the cool things that we've been seeing lately is, you know, you talk about, you know, workforce capacity constraints, like how can I use large language models internal to the organization, right, where they're kind of in a controlled manner to free up people's time, right? So like, for example, a great use case is in the contact center for after call work and things of that nature, right? Because those minutes add up very quickly and can quickly equate to 5, 10, 30, depending on the size, FTEs that now you have the ability to kind of play with and reallocate resources. It should be really interesting. I'm really bullish on ultimately how it'll help serve healthcare institutions for sure.
Absolutely. I think, you know, using chatbots is a nice way to kind of ease into it, especially on like a service desk, as you describe. And a lot of individuals who are younger and have familiarity with technology actually want to do more of that. So the more you can do that in your environment for those that want to use it, I think the better it will be, and the more free the organization will become of the standard processes, and you can think a little bit more outside the box. If you can free up some of the traditional way of doing things for something new and more adaptive to the way society's moving, that will allow you to really kind of devote your time to working on some of those strategies that really need to happen to get the organization to move in its strategic direction.
In my experience, it starts with that integration with whatever the single source of truth is for the organization, which in your case and in many cases is Epic. And it's going to be really interesting to see how the remodeling of these programs that they rolled out, this and the Friends and the Pals, how that plays into how different technology companies can interact with Epic. You know, it's a really exciting and, you know, interesting time. I think over the course of the next even like days, weeks, months, we're going to see some really cool stuff. A few more questions for you, Maria. And we kind of talked about some of this stuff before, but any best practices that you and your team follow that you might offer to some of our other CIO listeners?
Yeah, you know, one of the things I find to be very helpful for the IT team is to really follow the ITIL processes, which are the Information Technology International Library of Processes that help an IT organization just kind of get their foundation in place. And they're tried and true. And I think that's really, really important. Layer that with some lean initiatives and really think about, you know, how can you bring either a Six Sigma or a lean mentality to the way you do your work and deliver your services. That actually has really helped our organization and the IT function within OU Health to improve. And doing that simultaneously with our implementation allowed us to get a little bit ahead of that curve for post-live.
Those are a great practical suggestions. I love that you brought up ITIL. I mean, a lot of our frameworks are actually built off ITIL best practices. It's funny. Same thing with Lean and Six Sigma. So, Maria, what about any other innovative technologies? We started to kind of dip our toe in the water with generative AI, but any other innovative technologies that you're really excited about that are maybe on the roadmap or that you're thinking of for the future and that could serve to support the vision for OU Health?
This is a technology. I don't even know if it's a technology yet, but as I think through it, genomics is getting such a big play out there, and it's more about the science behind it. But when you think about how technology can take genomics and actually help a patient or help a healthcare organization better manage a patient, having the markers that, you know, are identified by genomic testing in an individual, and then saying, I'm not going to have that person get sick and have cancer because they have a cancer marker. How do I treat that patient so that they don't get that? The precision medicine, and what are the technologies that help you get there? Is it the technologies that allow you to better run those tests to understand the markers, or it's the technologies that you put in place for a patient who has discovered they have a marker for something? And is there a way to use technical solutions, monitoring tools, implants of some type to monitor how a patient is doing with respect to the specific markers they have? How does that patient build that relationship with their healthcare provider to avoid making those markers become a reality? And so I think there's a bunch of technologies that support that, not just one. But to me, the solution and the technical support for the precision medicine and the genomics, I think that's actually the wave of the future, and something I'd like to see OU Health really live into as we become more mature as an organization.
Great answer to that question. I was going to kind of ask you about where you saw the healthcare industry going in the future and what you thought would be some of the biggest changes as time passes. So that that kind of lends itself to that. Any other thoughts on the future of healthcare? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but you mentioned the wearables. Any other thoughts on the future of healthcare?
I think the future of healthcare is going to turn toward consumerism. And I think as the consumers become more savvy, not just with technology, but with what healthcare can truly do and be for them, I think we're going to find that healthcare is going to become more retailish and cater to an individual that says, I have high blood pressure. I want to go over here and see if I can get a solution that helps me that maybe I don't take a pill for. And there might be technologies that come in the future for something like that, where you avoid taking medicine for different ailments. But I think consumerism and how that will drive healthcare organizations to mature, not only technically, but to mature in terms of the services they deliver, I think that actually is going to be a strong force in our future.
I would tend to agree. Yeah, leading out of this week, we're going to be talking with CVS and Walmart too, which I think will be really interesting to see how, because they're obviously, making a big push, but it's great to see that, health systems are really taking the time, because there's so many advantages that health systems have clinically, operationally, and otherwise, that if they can make those strides towards consumerism, I think the future is really bright. So I would tend to agree with you there. Maria, this has been amazing. My final question for you would be, if you could go back 5 or 10 years in time, what advice would you give your younger self?
That's a really good question. I think if I could go back 5 or 10 years to, give myself some advice, it's don't be afraid to stand up for what it is that you believe in and do the right thing, and really think through taking a risk, because sometimes if you don't take that risk, you miss out on other opportunities, even if you are so uncomfortable with how the situation is or how you feel it's going to end up, because sometimes you can be really surprised that taking that risk is the thing that will define your moment better than not taking that risk ever could have. And so I would say take more risks, and I would tell myself to not be afraid to stand up and, tell it like it is.
Maria, thank you so much for taking the time today. Again, it was such a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. See you all next week.